So you want to think like a historian. Well, maybe you don't know it yet, but I promise you, you do. This is my third part in a multi-part series on how to think like a historian, in which I peel back the layers to show all the backroom labor that goes into producing historical work. I've already done videos on how to approach secondary sources or scholarly monographs, as well as a video on how to dissect primary sources, giving an example of the types of questions one might ask to be able to get a picture into what went on in the past. Today, we're going to talk about historiography. Now, historiography is the term that means how historical work fits within a broader scholarly discourse. In other words, you see all these books behind me. Historiography is assessing how these books fit in with one another. Let's dig in. Now, in the first video, I talked about the fallacy of believing that history is just reproducing what went on in the past, that the past world is lost, and that history is our conversation based on our own biases, our own questions, trying to draw from the sources we have in the past to make an argument. In other words, the types of questions and ideas and assumptions often shape the way we approach our historical topics. And further, our resulting historical work is often in conversation with work that other historians have already done. You're either building on work that historians have already written, or you are challenging and revising and revolutionizing the historical conversation, because that's what history is. It's a conversation. We're not just merely playing a ventriloquist and speaking in the voices of past figures. We are talking to our audience, to our other scholars, and we are trying to fit our work within a broader corpus of what scholars have said. I often explain to my students that this is the primary and often most difficult transition for people moving from an undergraduate education of history to a graduate education of history, which is seeing history not as just a memorization of content and just reciting what went on, to actually making an argument and seeing how your argument relates to a broader historical discipline as well as scholarly works. You're still interested in that content. You still have to master the sources, the context, and all these things, but you can't merely summarize it. You have to make an argument, and you have to fit that within the existing corpus of scholarly literature. This means realizing different types of sub-disciplines within the historical field of where your work fits in. Whether it's social history, you're trying to understand how lives were lived on the ground; political history, how it constructs these systems of political participation and belonging, marginalization; intellectual history, how you are focusing on the ideas of the past and how they evolved over time; or cultural history, how different elements are performed by historical actors. And those are just four possible historical disciplines that your work can fit into. And that's going to drive the types of questions you ask, the types of sources you draw from, and even the types of language and categories that you use. Now, with all that said, it should therefore be a red flag when you are approaching a historical book that seems ignorant of existing historical literature and methods and sources. Now, this isn't a breaking point, and there are important works that have completely disrupted the historical field. We're not merely repeating existing structures, but you should recognize that the best histories are those that are standing on the shoulders of work that has come before, recognizing and entering into that dialogue with other scholarly sources. There's a reason why the best scholarship builds on each other, and then eventually you get the truly revolutionary works that break that mold and offer a new interpretation. But you can't understand the significance of that without understanding the broader field. All right, I know that is all very abstract, but I want to provide a specific example of how historiographical questions and approaches can shape a work, and I'll use one of my own books. About 5 years ago, Liveright, an imprint of the publisher W. W. Norton, published my book Kingdom of Nauvoo, The Rise and Fall of a Religious Empire on the American Frontier. It's a story of the Mormon city-state that existed between about 1839 and 1846. And I discuss how the Mormons settled that area, how they related to their broader communities and the increasing tensions that resulted in Joseph Smith being killed by a mob while held as a state prisoner in a county jail. Now, my book was not the first to focus on Nauvoo. There's been a wealth of scholarship on early Mormonism in general, on Joseph Smith in particular, and even on the city of Nauvoo. Over 50 years ago, in fact, I think it's 60 years ago, Robert Flanders wrote his book, Kingdom on the Mississippi, which was published by University of Illinois Press, which was in many ways one of these foundational works in Mormon historiography, showing Nauvoo as this point of crisis. And then several decades later, you get Glenn Leonard, an employee of the LDS Church, publishing Nauvoo, a place of peace and a people of promise. So one might say, why do we need another book on Nauvoo? But this gets into the historiographical question because the types of questions you ask and the lens you bring to the work can offer a new perspective. Robert Flanders was very focused on the internal dissension within Nauvoo and the broader political debates that came from it. And Glenn Leonard is a quasi-devotional but very social history about history on the ground. Now, I came to the work due to the publication of the Council of 50 Records, this clandestine theocratic council that Joseph Smith established in his last few months. Maybe I'll do a video on it in the future. And that prompted me to think that maybe there are questions that haven't been asked by scholars in the past that would allow me to build on this historiographical foundation and offer a new analysis. So by way of example, I'm going to share with you the 3 primary questions that drove my research into the Kingdom of Nauvoo and how it relates to historiography. The first was the Council of 50 that Joseph Smith created was an explicitly framed theocratic council. They said that we want to establish a theocracy, and this is in an era of what scholars call the democratization of American Christianity, where the religions that flourished were those that embraced the common man and tore down hierarchies. So my first historiographical question was, what led Joseph Smith and his closest followers to believe that the democratic system had failed them and that the only recourse was to establish a theocracy? So I'm trying to critique the historiographical framing that typically sees Mormonism and Joseph Smith as the champion of the common man. And I try to push back and no, they're trying to cement authority in response to what they see as the excesses of democracy. My second question had to do with those who killed Joseph Smith. And it's this: how did otherwise law-abiding and peaceful citizens of neighboring counties who lived most of their lives without anything major violent going on come to believe that their only recourse to justice was lynching Joseph Smith in cold blood while he was held as a state prisoner? And so that was my question, to kind of push back at this historiographical framing that typically sees frontier justice as just an expression of the state. And I try to show, no, that this is an example of how the neighbors believed that the state had failed and they had to go outside existing legal systems in order to get their justice. And my third question was, how did women and the women's participation in Mormonism, and particularly polygamy, fit into this political story? Because if you look at the historiographies on early Mormonism, and especially on Nauvoo, you often get several camps. You get those who focus on politics, and then in a completely different camp, you have those who focus on polygamy. And I wanted to show that you can't understand either of these spheres without seeing how they related to each other. So I had an emphasis on how the practice of polygamy, women's participation in the public sphere, were all tethered to these evolving conceptions of democracy. Now, let me close by giving one other example of how your historiographical framing can shape the way you do history, showing both the potential and the limits of the historian's craft. Now, I'm frequently asked how my work in Kingdom of Nauvoo, and especially my depiction of Joseph Smith, differs from one of the quintessential books on Joseph Smith, Richard Bushman's Rough Stone Rolling, a biography that was published 2 decades ago. And I often answer that question by saying that Dr. Bushman and I had very different historiographical questions that brought us to framing the work. Bushman's book tries to understand what led Joseph Smith to be recognized as a prophet by tens of thousands of people. That's going to frame the way he does his work, which he acknowledges. My questions, as I mentioned before, included what led people to see Joseph Smith as such a threat that they had to kill him. So you can see how that type of interpretive framing is going to then structure the questions you ask, the sources you use, the narratives you invoke. That's how history works. I hope this video makes sense. I may do future parts in this series later on, but right now I think I'll stop it at 3. So if you haven't yet, please go back and see my parts on interpreting secondary sources or scholarly monographs, my part on interpreting primary sources and the type of questions you can ask, and now you've watched the part on historiography and how works fit into each other like one big jigsaw puzzle. History is a complicated, complex practice that lots of people get to participate in, and in many ways we're all straggling in the dark trying to capture some form of the past, but it's often best understood as a dialogue with one another where we are trying to learn through our works. I hope that makes sense. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Like and share this video. History has never been more relevant than right now, so these discussions are all the more important.